Hey, it's Arife, here with Resto Druid tips, tricks, and kicks for the Dawnbreaker dungeon in Season 3 of The War Within. If you feel like you're having trouble with this dungeon, don't worry, you're not alone. The changes they have made to this dungeon have made it worse for healers, not better, and also, this dungeon has so many bugs. Who needs party members to throw a dungeon when you could just have Blizzard throwing it for you? Either way, let's jump into the first 2 to 3 polls. I recommend using Stampeding Roar to give the DPS and tank a good start into the pack. If you forget to use your Stampeding Roar, you can still use it up the stairs after the first poll. You are probably faster than a lot of classes, so go ahead and try to grab that first melee interrupt with a Skull Bash if you can. That way, other people can use their kicks for the following casts. A habit I always try to get into, but I'm not especially good at, is to just always have life blooms being the first thing that you apply to your party frames. That way you can just start generating your clear-casted regrowths right off the bat. You're going to run into a couple of mobs here, the Nightfall Curse Blades, which in this poll, they're basically fodder. They do enrage on the tank and can be soothed, but there's too much else going on in the poll to worry about. The Nightfall Shadow Mage sends out a curse of ensnaring shadows that will need a defensive if it can't be dispelled. They also cast Nightfall at a random player. Keep this interrupted with Skull Bash, or you can Incapacitating Roar to delay its cast. The Nightfall Ritualist is the most dangerous mob in this group. It puts out a Sygian Steed, a powerful debuff that, if on you, you will need to move away from your allies and need to be dispelled. They also cast Tormenting Ray, which deals heavy damage to 2 players. Take your defensive if this is on you. Unfortunately, this mob cannot be CC'd. Another mob that can't be CC'd is the Nightfall Commander, who you'll see on the ship. They cast Abyssal Howl, which can be purged, and puts a shield on every mob and lets every mob cast for an additional 10% damage. But we can't do anything about that, and he puts a small bleed on the tank, so just be aware of the tank health there. The Ritualist is the priority target for that first pull, and somewhere between the Ritualist and the Commander are the prio targets for the second pull. On the other ships, you'll see a new mob, the Sareki Web Mage, who will target a random player with a Bursting Cocoon. DPS and healers should take a defensive before the cocoon expires, since it will burst for significant damage. You should try and heal the person who has the cocoon up to full before the cocoon bursts, otherwise they might die. If people in your party don't have a defensive up, you can use Iron Bark on them, and when you get this, you could Bear Form or use Bark Skin. These ships are great opportunities to use your DPS Convokes. Speaker Shadowcrown is a tough boss for us hot healers. The heal absorb with some of the crossover timings of the Obsidian Beam can be really a challenge to juggle. The first damage event will be the Beam. Feel free to do a little DPS here if people are topped up. Then you should run out and stack with a ranged player, because the boss is going to target 2 people with Void Zone Puddles, and ideally those are not spawned in melee, since this boss can be pretty challenging to move. When the player who is cursed is dispelled, a challenging heal absorb appears on the frames. I would save your Convoke for the second heal absorb, because there is a nasty overlap between the beam and the heal absorb that can be seen on this timeline that I pulled from maxroll.gg. That can be really hard to heal through with just HOTS alone. Remember, when you are healing, you have basically 2 different cooldowns you can cycle through, and one that you can kind of make work. And if you have a Lumithar's Silk Trinket, you have another cooldown. Everyone hotted up with Rejuve, your Life Bloom's Regrowth, and then a Wild Growth can probably get you through a heal absorb, with possibly some additional spot healing needed with regrowths. You can also throw Bark Skin on yourself or Iron Bark on a party member who looks like they might need a little bit of help. You also, alternatively, have Tranquility. Just make sure you aren't too close to the beam when you cast it. And then you can also use, if you have it, the Lumithar's Living Silk Trinket to help get you through one of the heal absorbs. It'll make it about half as difficult to heal. At 50%, the boss explodes with the Darkness Comes ability, and sometimes the heal absorb overlaps with this moment, which can be really tough to heal through. So if you see that 50% coming, just go ahead and try and hot everybody up, and then as Darkness comes, if the heal absorb pops off, then go ahead and cast Wild Growth. And you do have 15 seconds to get out of the area before Darkness actually comes. So if you need to wait a second to get on your mount in order to cast a Wild Growth, that should be plenty of time to do so. Grab some orbs and then come back, rinse and repeat. This is a heal, bait, heal, bait, heal, bait, heal, bait fight. Darkness comes again at 0% and follow the tank to the next destination. There are a few new mobs in this area after the first boss that are particularly dangerous, including the Nightfall Darkcaster, who sends out tormenting beams. You can interrupt the cast or in-cap roar the channel to stop it. And then there are the Nightfall Technicians. They aim a frontal at the tank and also enrage. You can soothe these mobs to help the tank out, since they are endangered by another mob called the Shadow Walkers that put a heal reduction on the tank. If a tank pulls too many Shadow Walkers, it can kill them. Their stacks of the heal reduction will climb up very quickly. At around 40 to 50 stacks, I like to put a vortex down so the tank can try to kite away from the mobs, creating an opportunity for the stacks to fall off. The manifested shadows send out a dark hail, so keep your feet moving. They'll spawn puddles around players, and they also target a random player with Abyssal Rot, which you should take a defensive for if it's on you. And you should move your life bloom around to whoever has a dot. This is very painful to heal and should not be pulled with the mini Excretin the Unbreakable, who also sends out Abyssal Blast, which is a similar style dot to Abyssal Rot, and those two dots can stack. Excretin the Unbreakable also targets the tank with a Terrifying Slam, which, if you are in the circle, you will get feared. If a tank pulls the Manifested Shadows with Excretin, that pull is illegal. You can't do that. If you have lust up, you'll head over to the next mini, Death Screamer, Ikenthak, who also targets someone with Abyssal Blast. Watch those dots, because they can overlap with the dark orb this mini sends out. When the orb hits terrain, it explodes and does a party-wide pulse of damage. You may want to bear form for the orb hitting the terrain to help you with it. Definitely take your defensive if your Abyssal Blast dot overlaps with the orb hitting the terrain. Finally, the last mini, Ascended Viscoxria, who will also apply Abyssal Blast. Make sure to put a life bloom and add other hots to the targeted party member. If you're targeted, use Bark Skin or Iron Bark on yourself. You can also use Iron Bark on another party member if they do not have their defensive up for that. Next, you'll see a big AoE, several pulses of damage, cycle through your cooldowns similarly to how you did so on the first boss. If this is the last mini you have before a second boss, try and use Tranquility earlier in this pull so you have a backup for second boss. Second boss, Anubikaj, is probably my least favorite boss of the entire expansion. You'll see the same Dark Orb ability that one mini had. Similarly, when it hits the wall, there is just one pulse of damage. You can bear form this to reduce the amount of overall healing you need to do before the bigger AoE. The tank will get a Tank Buster, Terrifying Slam, which causes a fear, don't be in it. And next we have the AoE. Cycle through your cooldowns. If you don't have the Loom's Living Silk Trinket, I find it easiest to heal the first AoE with your own hots to try to delay the use of major cooldowns. Rejuve everyone, 2 life blooms, defensive yourself, all the stops, and then a well-timed Wild Growth. You can use a cooldown for the next 2, but be aware that the third round of the AoE will overlap with the orb hitting the terrain. So it's really important that you have a cooldown like Convoke or Tranquility up for that. Use Iron Bark or Barkskin on yourself for the AoEs as needed. A random player will have little ads summoned around them, so just try to stick close to the boss as much as you can in order to bait those ads. They will need to be burned down, but also keeping them interrupted with in-cap roar or Skull Bash is very important on higher levels because they can one-shot, especially when overlapped by other boss abilities. Unfortunately, this boss starts a marathon of healing challenges, so after this boss, you head up to the Nightfall Dark Architect. Stay spread from other players to avoid the Tormenting Eruption hurting others. It's easiest to address this pack with full hots on everyone, so go ahead and apply those right off the bat. Tormenting Eruption is very heavy damage, and if applied to you, you should take a defensive. For others, move your life blooms around accordingly. Help with interrupting Nightbolt on this pull as well. The final boss of Dawnbreaker, Rashanon, has 2 phases. A tank must stay in melee range or it will wipe the party. Avoid the web spray lines, and then Rolling Acid will target one person, and they will need to move off to one side. Watch their health pool as it does some damage to the player once the wave is released. The boss will occasionally unleash Erosive Spray, an AoE that isn't that hard to heal on lower keys, but is very dangerous on higher keys. This is again in time to use your big cooldowns to heal the Erosive Spray dot and ensure everyone is well hotted up. In Phase 1, bombs appear on the deck. They need to be removed within 20 seconds or they will explode. Range should pick them up, and you can as well if you have time, depending on the key difficulty level. You will gain an action button when you pick it up. Make sure the boss is targeted and throw the bomb. The boss will be triggered to enter intermission below 64%. There are some tanks who like to do a pull in between Roshanon Phase 1 and Phase 2, but if that's not the case for your group, then you're going to go right to Phase 2 location. I get easily disoriented on this map, so I always just like to find the bridge where you fight the second boss and fly under there to get to the Phase 2 location. There's always an orb on the way. Phase 2 will add some complexity as 2 DPS will be targeted with those spinneret strands. This spawns webs underneath the players that tether them to the puddle, and it does significant damage to the player. You'll need to hop these webbed targets up and do good targeted healing on them. These web puddles do shrink into smaller pools when hit by the rolling acid. This can help with space management. And your pain is finally over when the boss hits 60%. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you learned a little bit about how you can use your toolkit to time this dungeon. Feel free to share all your stories about Dawnbreaker bugs with me in the comments.